That's what happens when you don't move fast enough. Old woman, the man snarled, his face twisted with contempt. He was perhaps 40, wearing an expensive suit that seemed grotesquely out of place in Rosie's diner, a modest establishment on the outskirts of Atlanta where Martha had been coming for breakfast every Sunday for the past 12 years. Martha's offense? She'd been slow to slide out of the booth when he demanded she move because he wanted that specific table. When she'd politely explained she was still eating her oatmeal, still had 20 minutes before the church service she never missed, he'd simply reached out and struck her. The other patrons sat motionless, suspended between shock and fear. The man was large, aggressive, and clearly unstable. Rosie herself stood behind the counter, one hand already reaching for the phone, her face pale. But Martha wasn't thinking about any of that. She was thinking about Birmingham in 1965, about sitting at a lunch counter where she wasn't wanted, about the remarkable truth that some things change while others remain stubbornly, heartbreakingly the same. She was thinking about her late husband, Robert, who'd taught her that dignity wasn't something anyone could take from you unless you handed it over. And she was thinking about her son, Marcus, who'd called just that morning from Washington, apologizing again for missing Sunday breakfast, his voice heavy with the weight of responsibilities she didn't fully understand. "Ma'am, are you all right?" A young waitress, couldn't have been more than 20, appeared at her side, defying the silence that had gripped everyone else. Her name tag read Jenny, and her hands shook as she offered Martha a napkin. "I'm fine, sweetheart," Martha said quietly, though her cheek was already beginning to swell. "Just fine." The man laughed, a cruel bark that echoed off the diner's walls. "That's right. Know your place." He slid into the booth Martha had occupied, spreading his arms across the back of the seat like he'd conquered territory. Jenny helped Martha to her feet, guiding her toward another table, but the older woman paused. She turned back to face her attacker, and when she spoke, her voice was steady and clear. "I'll pray for you," she said simply. "I'll pray that whatever hurt you're carrying that makes you strike an old woman gets healed. I'll pray that you find peace." The man's face contorted with rage. "I don't need prayers from some—" The diner door chimed, cutting him off. The morning sunlight silhouetted a tall figure in the entrance, and there was something about the way he carried himself that commanded immediate attention. He wore a dark suit, and he wasn't alone. Two other men flanked him, their bearing unmistakably official. Martha's breath caught. "Marcus?" Marcus Williams's eyes found his mother instantly, sweeping over her with the trained assessment of someone who'd spent 20 years in federal law enforcement. His gaze locked onto her reddening cheek, the broken cup on the floor, and finally onto the man sprawled arrogantly in the booth. "Mom!" His voice was controlled, but Martha heard the tremor beneath it, the barely contained fury of a son seeing his mother hurt. He crossed the diner in 4 strides, his companions moving with him in synchronized precision. "Baby, what are you doing here?" Martha asked, though her eyes were already filling with tears of relief. She hadn't known she needed to shed. "Finished the briefing early. Wanted to surprise you." Marcus gently cupped her face, examining the injury with a tenderness that contrasted sharply with his imposing presence. "Who did this?" The man in the booth had gone very still, his earlier bravado evaporating as he registered the situation developing around him. One of Marcus's companions had moved to block the exit. Not obviously, but definitively. "It's nothing, Marcus. Just a misunderstanding." "Ma'am." Marcus turned to Jenny, who stood wide-eyed nearby. "What happened here?" Jenny glanced at Martha, who gave a small nod. The young waitress's words tumbled out, describing the demands, the refusal, the violence, while other diners began to add their own testimonies, their voices growing stronger as they found collective courage. The man tried to stand. "Look, I don't know who you think you are, but—" "Sit down." Marcus didn't raise his voice, but the command was absolute. He reached into his jacket, producing credentials that made Rosie gasp behind the counter. "Marcus Williams, Director of Field Operations, Department of Homeland Security." He paused, letting that sink in. "And this is my mother." The color drained from the man's face. The diner had gone silent again. But this time the quality of the silence was different, expectant, almost electric. "You assaulted a 73-year-old woman over a table. Marcus continued, his voice tight. A woman who marched for civil rights before you were born. A woman who raised 3 children on a cafeteria worker's salary. A woman who volunteers at the Children's Hospital every Tuesday and Thursday. My mother. She... The man's rehearsed aggression had completely dissolved. Marcus held up a hand. I could have you arrested right now. Assault on an elderly person. Federal witnesses. I could make sure this follows you for the rest of your life. He paused, and the diner held its breath. But that's not what she would want. Is it, Mom? Martha stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on her son's arm. Marcus, honey, no. Mom, he hit you. I know what he did. Martha looked at the man, who couldn't meet her eyes. But I also know what anger and hate do to a person's soul. I've seen it. I've lived through eras defined by it. She addressed the man directly. Whatever made you think it was acceptable to strike another human being, especially someone who couldn't fight back? That's something you need to examine. That's something you need to fix, or it'll poison everything you touch. The man's shoulders began to shake. Whether from fear, shame, or genuine emotion was unclear, but tears were streaming down his face. I'm sorry, he whispered. God, I'm so sorry. My wife left me yesterday, took the kids, and I've been so angry at everything, and There's no excuse. I'm so sorry. Martha was quiet for a long moment. Then she did something that made Jenny gasp, that made Rosie wipe her eyes with her apron, that made even Marcus's stern companion shift uncomfortably. She sat down across from the man. What's your name? She asked gently. David Patterson. Well, David, I accept your apology. But you need to understand something. Hurt people hurt people. That's a cycle, and you get to choose whether you continue it or break it. You have children watching how you handle pain. What are you teaching them? David Patterson broke down completely, his sobs raw and uncontrolled. I don't know. I don't know anymore. Marcus watched his mother work the same magic she'd worked on him and his siblings, countless times, turning moments of anger into opportunities for growth, for understanding. She talked to David for 20 minutes, learning about his marriage troubles, his job stress, his father's recent death. She listened with the same attention she'd given. Marcus, when he'd come home angry about playground fights or teenage heartbreak. Finally, she stood. David, I'm going to give you my number. There's a group at my church, people dealing with divorce, with loss. I want you to call me, and I'll introduce you, and I want you to get some help, real help, for that anger. David nodded, unable to speak. Marcus remained silent until they were outside, the Atlanta morning warm and bright. Mom, how do you do that? Do what, baby? Show grace to someone who hurt you. Martha smiled, the expression pulling at her bruised cheek. Your grandmother used to tell me that everyone we meet is fighting a battle we know nothing about. That man back there, he's drowning. I've been blessed enough to learn how to swim. How could I not throw him a rope? He still committed assault. There are consequences. There are, Martha agreed. And I trust you'll do what's right. But Marcus, you've spent your whole career protecting people from threats. I'm asking you to remember that sometimes the threat and the person who needs protecting are the same individual. Marcus pulled his mother into a careful hug. I'm going to make sure he gets evaluated, that he follows through with counseling. And yes, there'll be a formal report, community service at minimum. But you're right, as usual. Inside the diner, Rosie refused to let Martha pay for her meal. Jenny hugged her tightly. Other patrons approached, sharing their own stories of witnessing cruelty and wishing they'd been brave, enough to respond differently. David Patterson sat alone in the booth, staring at the phone number Martha had written on a napkin, looking like a man who'd just glimpsed a different version of himself and was terrified of losing sight of it. 2 months later, Marcus received a letter at his office in Washington. It was from David Patterson, written in careful handwriting. He'd completed 8 weeks of anger management therapy. He was in the church group Martha had recommended. He'd had his first civil conversation with his ex-wife in 6 months and had scheduled regular time with his children. He was volunteering at a senior center, reading to residents every Saturday morning. I don't expect forgiveness, the letter concluded, but your mother showed me something I'd forgotten existed. The possibility that I could be better than my worst moment. She saved my life that morning, and I wanted you to know. Please thank her for me. I'm not ready to face her yet, but someday maybe I will be. Marcus brought the letter to Sunday breakfast. handing it to his mother without comment. She read it slowly, tears tracking down her cheeks. And then she folded it carefully and tucked it into her purse. "See?" she said, smiling at her son across the table at Rosie's diner. In the same booth where everything had happened. Everyone can change. Everyone deserves the chance. And Marcus, who dedicated his life to protecting his country from its enemies, who'd seen the worst humanity had to offer, looked at his mother and understood that perhaps the greatest act of patriotism, the strongest form of protection, was exactly what she practiced every day. The radical, transformative power of grace. Outside, Atlanta moved through another Sunday morning, full of people carrying invisible burdens, fighting unseen battles, and hopefully somewhere among them, learning that kindness isn't weakness. It's the strongest force in the world.